Hey guys, it's Tarek with Cyclone FPV. Excuse me, and it's I don't know, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And right now I'm getting ready to do some repairs. I just got done doing a build earlier, and I'm getting ready to do some repairs right now. And sorry, I'm scrolling here to try to find an update that I'm looking for. But one thing that got my attention here that man, I'm sorry, I've got a cold. One thing that got my attention here that I thought I'd put a video together on is Cyclone FPV is the, we do all the repairs in the US and the warranty repairs and warranty replacements for HGLRC, which is one of the, probably one of the highest selling as far as stacked component manufacturers, right? And so I get a lot of product in here from people that, they've got a bad ESC, a bad flight controller, or a bad VTX. And I'm starting to see a pattern of common causes of these problems. So I figured, well, I'm gonna actually, I've got I've got some product, as you can see in front of me here. I'm getting ready to do some warranty replacement and repairs on these, and I thought that it would actually be a pretty good idea to go ahead and kind of go over some of the things that I'm seeing. And try to discuss like a good practice, right? A good way of doing this. So I'm not saying that whatever way you may do it is wrong. What I'm trying to tell you is a lot of people aren't prepared to work on boards this small, and therefore I see solder issues that are really causing a problem. And I just contacted HGLRC to verify something, and there is a concern that if you heat the board up too much, the chips will start to move, right? And that's actually pretty common. The problem is people don't give it enough credit. And so in this case, I'm going to try to adjust the screen here so I can show you a little bit. So what I decided I was going to do was I was going to kind of give you a demonstration here on when I do the boards and when I solder on them, what I look at. So this is an example of a board that was sent to me for repair. Okay, now the board itself, I have not tested the board yet to see what's wrong with it, but I will tell you that the concern I have already is the way the solder is laid out, okay? So if you look at this board, and I'm going to try to get a little pointer here so I can show you what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm going to look for, under the magnifying glass, but you can look, I guess, through the camera here, right? So let me see, let me just make sure I can keep it right in frame so you can see. All right, let's try that. All right. So what I want you to notice is, if we're looking right here, you see how we've got some pretty thick solder, and we've definitely got some solder that has kind of drifted off here. So there's a little piece right here. I don't know if you can see that, but that piece is not part of the board, and it's not on the pad. It's just kind of roaming somewhere in the middle there. These are areas of problems, right? And it just keeps going. Like we've got solder runoff here. If you look at the way the solder is done here, I mean, it's not clean. And I'm not criticizing this person as much as I'm saying when you're talking about a micro board, like a seriously small board, you have to be much more careful and much more accurate with your solder. And this involves doing a few things. So anyways, I'm going to do the F440. So here's what I've got here. This is a brand new F440. And what I want you to look at, what I want you to notice first of all, is when you end up with pins like this, right? Now HGLRC has corrected this by putting some, I don't know, like an adhesive down or an epoxy down. But when you have pins that are exposed like this right here, the chance of breaking them is really high. And so what we did is, it came to HGLRC's attention, and they have corrected it, but there's still a lot of boards out on the market. So what I've done here is I've taken something as simple as a hot glue and just put a drop on each side. It'll spread, right, and it'll cover the pins. This is an excellent step to protect your board because you are taking a flight controller, right, and this is the flight controller that came with this one. And you can see here, this is the epoxy that's being used here, so to speak. And so anyways, one of the biggest problems that existed was that when you would put these together like this, right? And people would just they would kind of manhandle them a little tough. Well, anyways, the pins would rip off. And unless you're lifting straight up, there's a good chance that you could damage your pins. So So what I thought I would do is I talked with HGLRC tonight, and again, like I said, we are their U.S.-based repair center and warranty center. So I thought, well, let me go ahead and get this started. So here's the deal. If you're going to solder, right, if you're going to go ahead and do some soldering, the first thing that you want to do, and let me go ahead and just get over here real quick, is, okay, so if you're going to solder on these boards that are really small, right, the first thing you're going to want to do is you want to get like some flux, okay? And this is going to allow the solder to adhere to the board properly on the pads and also prevent it from running off, okay? So if you're looking for something like this, you can get this on Amazon. It's just a flux pen. It's a pretty simple thing to get, but it's a night and day difference when you try to solder. If you try to solder without it, you're going to mess up. You're going to have a messy area, and your solder may not adhere properly. And so, please, the first thing is you need to get something like this, okay, the flux pen. So just go on Amazon and find it. And if you have any questions about it, you can let me know. The next thing, and I guess the tag is missing here, I wanted to show you, let's see if I have another roll of it. The solder itself is critical, and I cannot find the roll right now, but it's going to be a Kester solder, and I think it's a 6733 or 6337 mix. Your solder is going to be critical, and the thickness of the solder is going to be critical as well. So make sure that you're getting something. Let me see if I can find this one here. If I can find it on Amazon real quick, I'll tell you. And if I don't find it right now, I will post it. But if you want to see, let me see if I can find this here. I cannot see. I don't see the tag, and unfortunately mine has come off. But let me just show you what it looks like. So this is a solder that I use, right? It's extremely thin. It's I think it's like 0.3, and I believe it's a 6733 or a 6337, whatever it is. It is critical as well that you use a solder like this, and Kester sells it on Amazon. And let me, you know what, I think I can grab it here. So let me just see if I can find it, and then if I can find it on this phone, then I will tell you exactly. I will show you what to get, because this is going to be critical for you guys who are going to want to be soldering like this. So let me find Kester solder. There it is. This is it right here. Okay, so the Kester solder that I'm telling you is what I use on the HGLRC boards when I'm using my repairs or doing my repairs, is this one right here. And I think you can see that. That is a 6337 mix right there, okay? And so it's going to be, let me see, it's a 6337, and let me see if I can give you any other details with it. It is it's got a rosin core flux, right? And it's definitely based. It's 0.031 inches, and that's the key. And the composition is 63% tin, 37% lead. So look, if you want to get an awesome solder material, like I said, the Kester right here would be the way to go, and it's $24. And I can tell you that one roll or one spool of it has lasted me like, oh my gosh, I mean, probably 6 months. I mean, because you don't have to use that much. But these are the things that like right now when I'm looking at these soldering jobs that are coming in for repair, and I'm going, man, I mean, the solder is wrong. The way it's been done is wrong. So I'm going to kind of put together. I'm going to do this real quickly and try to give you an update on how to do it, because I've got to do a repair anyway. So I thought this might be a good idea, and it may not be. Maybe you're going to hate this, but if I end up repairing your stuff, I'm going to say I gave you a warning ahead of time. Okay, so the first thing is this. You can go ahead and get all these things like these fancy little, holders, tray holders and stuff, but it's really not necessary for what we're doing, right? One of the reasons is I've seen people use these, and then what they do is the idea behind this is it's designed to, let me zoom out here. So it's designed to slide back, and then you put your chip in, right? So let's just say you use it like this, and it's supposed to hold it in place. The problem is there are incidents, and I've seen it, I mean, with people using it, where the pressure of the arm here will push onto a chip on the board, and that causes a damage. So let's just keep it simple, right? Get yourself some masking tape, and this is definitely what I would recommend, because it's cheap, anybody can afford it, and it's easy to use and readily available. So here's what I would do if I'm doing this. I'm going to go like this. I'm a right-handed, so I'm going to hold my soldering iron in the right hand, and I'm going to hold my tweezers, which you're going to need to get some tweezers, so get some really good ones. Not these fine ones, though. Get the flat tip ones, because as the wire heats up, you'll end up poking through that if you keep it on there too long. So look, take your board here and just tape it down. The whole idea behind this is it's not wiggling all over the place, right? And so from here, I'm going to look at the pads and I'm going to show you now. Here's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid pads that have this much stuff gunked on them and it's kind of leaking over. I don't know if I can show you that any better. Let me show you what we're trying to avoid here. So when I look at this, it concerns me here because the solder has run off. It's kind of gooped up in little places. And what my concern is on this side is that the solder has run. You start getting very close here to the other chips here. So anyways, so just make sure, and let me just get to it. I'm going to show you what to do. So the first thing is you're going to apply, go ahead and apply your flux from your flux pen. And one way to make sure it's ready is you can just slide it. And as long as you see a wet line here, then you know that it's good to go. And you're not pressing, right? You're just kind of painting it on like a paintbrush, okay? And you're going to let it dry. And when that's dry, while that's drying, you're going to go ahead and do the other side and do all your pads, okay? Now I've already done these two because I had to test this board earlier for a different work that I was doing. So once you're ready, and it's going to be dry here in just a second, the next thing is to make sure you've got a good soldering iron set up. So I've got my soldering iron, I've used it a lot tonight, but I've got my soldering iron set at 360 degrees Celsius. All right, and I would recommend it. That's a pretty safe temperature. So get yourself a wire brush like this. Now this one's been used and abused, but it's excellent. These little gold things over here, you know, the kind where you, I don't know, you stick the soldering iron in and it's supposed to scrub it or whatever and actually tin it. Those are great and all, but I want to clean this. So here's what I want you to see is how kind of dull this is, right? I mean, you can still see the silver here, but I'm going to clean it real quick and it's very easy. And I'm just going to go over it real quickly with the brush, okay? So now when I look at the tip, it's clean, it's got no debris on it whatsoever, and it's ready to go. The flux is ready to go, and so I'm now going to take my solder. So let me grab a piece. Now, I'll do this by hand, but you can use tweezers if you want. So here's the deal. The idea here is to bring the soldering iron to the pad first, and then just touch it with the solder, right? Now, if your flux is dry, you get a nice smooth pad, right? So this is what you want your pads to look like. They're not touching the chip, they're not getting anywhere near the chip, they're actually staying right on the pad like they're supposed to, and it takes all of a second to do. So I'm going to show you how this is done, and then you can, you know, give it a shot, but at least you can see what I would be looking for if I'm doing the work is I'm looking for something like this. So now I'm going to turn it back around, I'm going to do the other side. And here goes. So we'll just knock it out real quick, right? So there's one, and it doesn't take much. So don't like plan on putting a ton on there. You're just trying to pre-tin the pad, right? So get that done. And whatever you do, don't hold it on there too long because you're going to put some heat on there. Okay, so that's it. We just pre-tin the board, at least on the ESC pads, and now I want to show you what we're looking at. Okay, so here is a comparison, and this is the old board that somebody sent in, right? And let me see if I can get that there for you. Okay, and this is the board that we just pre-tinned. Okay, so you can see if I can get this to focus. All the pads are neatly done. I mean, they're not. It's not dripping off the pad. It hasn't run down the side. It's not on the bottom or the back. I mean, it's a clean solder, and it took all of what, 5 seconds or 30 seconds actually to do. So you want to be able to have a clean solder like this. This is going to save you from having things break. And do not worry if when you're pre-tinning you have a gap here, like if you have a little bit of the pad left, don't worry, because the minute you put your wire on it, it's going to go ahead and complete. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do the wire side, right? So on this particular board though, you're supposed to put your capacitor on one side, ideally, okay, which is going to be the smaller holes here, and you're going to put your LiPo on that side, or your LiPo connector. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this back down, and I believe I pre-tinned that. I'm pretty sure I did. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I need to angle this a little bit so I can get to it easier, and I'm just going to hit it real lightly, and as long as I pre-tinned it, I should be okay. So there's one, and there's the other one, okay? Now I'm not near the chip, I've got nothing near any of the chips here, and you can see now where this those pads are now touched properly, but they're not causing any problems. So this is just a good example of what you need to be trying to achieve when you're soldering. Now you can see here that there is an opening. There's like a gap on the pad, like right there, I think on that third one, on the corner. Once I put the wire down there, that's going to disappear, and I'm going to show you exactly what that's going to be like right now. So I'm going to grab a motor, and let me see, I have a practice motor here that I think is a broken motor, so I can use it without having to open a new one. Okay, so this is an HGLRC that I used and abused during a test flight, and it's all toast now, right? So one of the things, again, that you have to focus on is how you're going to pre-tin your wire before you try to connect it. So let's assume that you get it out of the box and there is none of the leads are set, right? So let me go ahead and just zoom out here and kind of show you what we're doing. All right, so here's your motor, all right? And you already know that based on this, you have very little room to work. So there's no need for your wire to be longer than the pad. And so in this case, if you want to really be specific, you've got about a 1 millimeter gap there. So if you were to actually strip 1 millimeter of this out, you would be stripping a very small piece out. The idea is to go to like 2 or 3 millimeters and then spin it, tin it, and then cut it. And then when you do that, you can make your cut to 1 millimeter. So let's say we're going to go, I'm just going to make it look like this and try to make it uniform, okay? So I'll do this and then I'll measure it and we'll see how accurate we are. All right. And once you get the hang of it, you'll understand that your measurements should pretty much become consistent. So I've got here, if you can look at the ruler, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but I'll just measure it anyway. So I've got 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters. So, and then I need to twist this real quick, but if you can see, yeah, that light's going to get in the way, I guess, but let me just kind of zoom in and see if I can show you. So you've got 3 millimeters here, right? All right, and that's going to be the 3 millimeter mark. Yeah, I think that'll be better if I show you like this. So there's 3 millimeters there. And then we're going to take this one and spin it. And you want to spin it so that the threads get together and so it doesn't, so the strands stay together when you tin it. So here we're at about 3 millimeters as well. So if you look at that, you've got about 3 millimeters there. And then I think this one may fall short at like 2 3/4, but still, it's consistent to the most part. So it's going to be about almost 3 millimeters, about 2 3/4. Okay. So once you get to that point, go ahead and twist the strands. All right. Do not just leave them like that to tin, but twist them and try to get them as tight as you can. There you go. All right. Once you've done that, you need to tin these wires. Now, tinning these wires basically means you're going to be putting solder on the wire so that when that solder touches the board and the solder gun makes contact to it, it's going to melt instantly, and that's where you're going to get your heat from. So what I do is I grab like these alligator arms or whatever they're called, these clips, and I will set a piece of solder just like that, okay? And here I can zoom out a little bit so you can see. And I'm going to take the motor and I'm going to run all 3 strands until they're covered. So now if you look at the tip here, and this is something, that's what I was talking about earlier. You see how it's kind of, let me see if I can get that to look. It's kind of, you can tell that it's got some crap on it, right? So just take your wire brush and just scrape it off, all right? And make a habit of doing this. And so now you can see the tip is ready to go. So I'm going to take the motor and I'm going to do the following. I'm going to go ahead and just feed it down the solder wire, just like that. And that is now a tinned wire. And if you can see that, I don't think the camera is going to pick that up very well, but if you could see it, you would see the difference between a wire that's been tinned and a wire that's not. And I can't make it focus on something that small, so I apologize. But basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to just get your solder to adhere to it so that it can pass the heat through very quickly and then melt to the other piece. So just follow it down and then do your last one, right? All right, so now here's where I see the biggest problems with people. So now you're done with this. You can get rid of this, put it back here, and now we're ready to go. So we've got our board taped down, so it's not going to move. We've got our motor ready, but now you've got to cut back on the excess wire. So on the F440, for example, you are extending by about 1.5 millimeters if you leave a 3 millimeter cut, and you don't want to do that. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want, and I'm going to get different cutters because mine are dull here, so let me just swap these out real quick. Okay, so we've got about 1.5 millimeters to play with, and there's about 3 millimeters on here. So the one thing you want to do, and you don't have to measure it, but just guess that you're going to take off what looks to be, to some people I guess, way too much. But this is what you're going to be left with. That's all you want to solder, okay, is this little piece. I think you can see that. That's it. And that should measure about 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters. So if I take the ruler and I check this out, I am right at about 1.5 millimeters. I don't know if you can see that, but let me see if that comes up. Yeah, so you should be able to see that's right at about 1.5 millimeters. And that's exactly all you need. So once you get used to doing that, just do it a couple times, right? So one, and then we're going to do this one, and then we're going to do this one. And if you cut it short, like that middle one's a little short, I wouldn't worry about it because it's better to have it short. It's still going to get a good grip. Once you've got to this point, this is where you're going to definitely need your tweezers, right? And you don't want to use sharp ones because if you heat up the outside sheathing area, these can actually poke through it and then expose the wire inside. So you want to have something flat like these right here, okay? And those will just give a good grip. And then you want to start soldering, but you want to solder from one direction only, meaning you want, sorry, I had to close the drawer there. You want to solder from, you don't want to overlap. So you wouldn't want to start, let's say we're soldering the top ESC number 4, right? Or what's number 2, the way this is laid out, but assuming whatever. You wouldn't want to start here and then go over to the next one and then over to the next one because you don't want to pass your soldering iron over this direction. What you want to do is once you're done with one solder, you just want to be done with it, period. So I'm going to clean the tip off here real quick. And this is how I would do an F440 ESC. All right, so I will take one pin or one wire, and I will go ahead and get it right to the spot where I want it. And then in about 1.5 seconds, it's going to go ahead and just totally melt down right there. And you're not going to push on it. It's just going to, the weight of the soldering iron is going to get it perfect on its own, okay? So there's one, and then you're going to get this lined up, and that's going to be 2, all right? And then this is going to be number 3. So what you're going to notice when you're done is, because you've got the tweezers, your hands aren't getting hot, and they're able to hold precisely where you need to be. But what I want to show you is what's left. So look from the bottom, because this is going to be the easiest way to tell. If you look at this solder, you do not see any exposed wiring here. That sheathing is all the way up to the pad, right? And if I flip it over, you don't see any exposed wiring there. This is a complete good soldering connection, and it's extremely strong. And if you wanted to, like my method is to go ahead and put glue between this when it's done to even hold it even more and keep the dirt and elements out. But this is what you would want to do. Once you're done with that, let's say you're going to solder a capacitor, right? So this is something else that people need to be really careful of is, okay, so we've got our tape holding our board down, right? And we know for a fact that capacitors have markings on them. One side's always going to have this negative looking mark, and this is telling you that this is the negative side. If you've ever plugged in a capacitor wrong like I have, and I did a couple weeks ago, this entire side will blow out. I mean, it'll explode. Oh, I've got the solder. I've got it right here, actually. What ends up happening is it looks like this. Let me grab this real quick. So this is what the inside of one of those containers looks like. Okay, it just blew this entire cap right off and scared the living crap out of me. So be very careful with that. Now, I'm not going to cut this. I'm just going to use it like it is. But if you know that the line is negative, and obviously there's colors here too, if you look at the board, you've got a negative and a positive right here. So if I'm hooking up this capacitor, and I'm going to do it this way because I need it to fit properly, I'm going to go ahead and lay it down, and I'm going to make sure that the wires do not extend into a component of some sort. And if you look at that, you can see the wires are kind of long. So first thing you're going to do is the same like you would a regular wire. Go ahead and snip the wire and get it down pretty low. Something along that line, I guess. And there, okay? And again, we're going to tin this, but not the same way. Because this is a pretty easy piece to get, because it's not going to be running all over the place, I'm just going to kind of hit it with the soldering iron real quick. Nothing major, but just enough to kind of give me a little drop on each side. So I'm going to hold it. Let me get in the camera here. So I'm going to hold it with my finger, or you can use whatever you want, and just kind of dab just a little bit on there. That's all. That's all I want to do, so that I can at least initiate the solder joint, okay? From here, I'm going to take one side, and I guess, I don't know, I could start with the ground, I guess. I mean, it doesn't make a difference, but I'm going to go ahead and just real quickly just tap it on there, and it's done. I mean, that's all there is to it. And what I'm noticing, and what HGLRC brought to my attention today, was that some people are putting their soldering iron, watch, like, I mean, if you literally took a count, that's it. I mean, it's not even a second, right? And that sucker's on there good. So if you want to look at it, there is your capacitor now soldered on, all right? And it was less than a second to make that happen. What's happening is people are, do capacities reduce video noise? Yeah, the capacitors are definitely important in the noise. If they have to be placed properly, but they can definitely reduce the noise. There's also other factors, Ben, that can cause the noise. So, I mean, you know, it's one way or the other, but I fly with capacitors sometimes. Probably 75% of the time I don't. People aren't going to like that. They're going to say that I'm an idiot for doing that, but it's because a lot of the times the noise is due to a bad, well, for me, the signal is due to a bad channel or bad interference somewhere else. I'm not really getting much noise from the quad itself, but a rule of thumb is, yeah, if you want to try to clean it up, you could clean it up with that. Okay, so this is done, right? So there's your capacitor now, and it's on. So now we've got a clean solder and a capacitor, and the only thing left is going to be your LiPo. And again, I'm looking at things like this one that was sent to me, and I'm not I'm not picking on the person by any means, because this is probably the better of the ones I usually get, but this is a lot of solder. I mean, we're talking about a lot of solder left over, a lot of solder kind of poured up on there and gunked up on there. And so I want you to remember that if you can put a capacitor on in less than a second with the soldering iron, the idea is you really don't need that much to do anything else. So, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on how thick the wiring is. Like, this is an extremely thick wiring, but it's not necessary for this build. You know what, I'll probably, let me just use it anyway. Probably be a good idea to just give you an example of if it's a big build. I mean, if it's a thick wire, I don't really personally like the wire that's on this XT60, but you know, sometimes that's just the way it's going to be. So again, you have these strands, right, and you need to tin them, meaning you've got to get them pre-soldered. Again, we're going to bring out the alligator clamp here, and I'm going to, now this is going to require a little bit more solder, so I may run out on this first run, but I'm going to go ahead and just give it a shot and see if I can fill this one up. Now, on here, you're going to want to make sure that you come from underneath, that you get all around, because this is a pretty thick wire, and you can't afford to not have, and you can see there where the one end's soldered and the other side's not. And then at that point, I would usually just roll it along my soldering iron and just try to spread it around, okay? Now, it's going to get a little clumpy, but I'm not worried about it, because when I touch the board with it, it's going to just kind of blend into the board. So let's just assume that one's done, and then let me go ahead and change this out and put another piece of solder on here, right? And so now we're going to do the other side. We're going to do the ground, and again, we're just going to go ahead and make sure it gets on there, right? And as long as you've got the soldering iron on there, it's going to heat it up all the way around. Okay, so there's both our pieces, right? And they're good to go. Let me get this out of here. And now we're going to go ahead and tape down our board again. And this time we're going to tape it down this way. And just careful of your pins there, that you don't put too much pressure on them. I can scoot this up just a little bit so the pins really aren't in there. But this is what I'm looking for, right? Okay, so now we've got our, I need my tweezers here, and we've got our positive here and our ground here. So what you want to do is just kind of, these are such different sizes. Well, it's fine. If you ever have different sizes, always do the larger side first, right? And make sure that you've got enough solder on the pad for the size of the wire. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. I'm going to add a little bit more here, but don't hold it there for too long, because you can heat the chip up. All right, so at that point, I'm just going to hold this, and that heat is going to pass through to the solder that's on the board. And as soon as it does, it's going to go ahead and fuse those two together, right? So we'll let that happen there. And then once we get a little bit of a hold, we can bring the ground. Make sure your tape is holding. There's such a huge gap in the length here that it's probably not going to be in my best interest. I would normally have cut it down, but I didn't in this case. So let me just get this soldered on. All right. And then I'll come back and I'll do this one real quick. Let me see where I'm at. Okay. I don't really, not really getting a good grip on that one. Let me just get it a little bit better here. So bear with me a second. All right, now let's see what we've got. Okay, so the ground and the positive are on there very clean. If you want to just kind of like trim it up a little bit, there you go. But they're fused on really well, right? Still, we have no runoff, and they're on very solid, and the board is not hot, meaning I can sit here and hold my fingers to it. So I know I didn't hold the solder on here or the soldering iron on for too long, and I'll look for little pins or whatever and kind of trim them up. So there's that, right? Okay, let me see what I've got here. All right, so now we're done with this. This is the sample of what I wanted to show you. Now you would do the same with the rest of the motors, okay? At this point, it's time for you to put your flight controller on, right? And so I'm trying to see which one this channel. Okay, so here's the flight controller that was sent with the other board. When you place it on here, you're gonna obviously have your spacers. And at this point, you're pretty much done with your ESC. You've got your LiPo set, you've got your capacitor set, you've got your motors all done, and you should basically be able to plug this in and hear the ESC fire up, right? So assuming everything is done properly, I always take another look. The one thing that I do that I think people should start doing more of is taking their continuity checker and making sure that you do not have, so obviously when you use this, if it beeps, it means you have a connection, right? So the first thing you want to do is you want to touch your ground and your positive and make sure that you have, let me remove this real quick. Well, here, let me just turn it around. So you want to make sure that you don't have that beep when you touch these two, right? So as long as you don't have a beep there, then come on over to your capacitor and hit those, and again, there's no beep. At this point, I would say it's pretty safe to go ahead and plug in your LiPo to test. And that doesn't mean you're not going to have it pop in your face, but it's probably a good idea to give it a shot. And I can't do that because I put this in reverse. So let me do this because this is actually for my testing. So let me just try it like this. All right. So I don't think I'm going to be able to actually use that. I had this set up for a different test, and I don't believe, but I'll try. We'll see. As long as I don't blow anything up, we should be okay. Okay, so there we go. We've got our power going and everything's looking pretty good. So we have no problems there and everything's fine. So I hope that helps you guys as far as how to get your soldering joints better. This would be the way that I would recommend doing it. And if you have any questions, just hit me up. So that's doing the ESC on the F440. You can find this video on the product page when it's done. And then I'll come back and do the VTX, which is sitting right here, and how to connect it to the flight controller. All right, guys, and that's it for me. So if you have any questions, let me know. Hit me up at CycloneFPV.com. I'm going to be doing more of these videos just so that we can put better support for the product that we're providing you guys. And if you need any kind of video done, we're doing them usually within the same day. So hit me up at CycloneFPV.com or go to our Facebook page at Facebook.com/CycloneFPV. I'll talk to you all soon. Take care. Bye.